They never hit me. They never yelled. But for 30 years, my parents made one thing clear: my life came second. My younger brother, Ethan. He got the GoPros, the tuition, the sympathy. I got the lectures. So when they smiled at my wedding and said, "We'll keep your gift money, your brother actually needs it," I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I handed them a legal cease and desist signed by our wedding lawyer. My name is Logan Carter, and this is how I stopped financing my family's favorite son. They never had to say it out loud. I was the older one, the strong one, the one who could take care of himself. That silent script was handed to me before I even understood what it meant. My parents never sat me down and told me that my younger brother Ethan was more important. But every choice, every gesture, every shrug made it crystal clear. Ethan needed more, and I was expected to give. By the time I was 10, I was already changing Ethan's diapers, helping him with homework. I barely understood myself and giving up the last slice of pizza because Mom said he cried when he didn't get it. She would smile at me like I was doing something noble, like martyrdom was a badge of honor. Dad didn't say much. He just let it happen, a quiet nod here and there, always siding with Margaret when she brushed off my complaints. Growing up in a 2-bedroom rental in Mesa, Arizona, there wasn't much space for privacy. But there was always enough space for favoritism. When Ethan threw tantrums, Mom would shush me. "Just give him the toy, Logan. You know how he gets." And I did. I knew how he got. I just didn't understand why it was always my job to make peace. At 17, I started working after school. Weekends were for the register at the local grocery store. I didn't want to ask my parents for money because I already knew the answer. "Things are tight, Logan." But then, like magic, they'd turn around and buy Ethan a brand new GoPro for his birthday. When I asked, they just said it was for his future. He wants to be a filmmaker. He needs tools. I needed shoes. I got into the University of Utah with a partial scholarship. I took out loans and moved to Salt Lake City. That was the first time I ever felt like I could breathe. Being on my own didn't mean freedom, not really, because I was still scraping by, still sending birthday cards home, still hearing about how Ethan was struggling and could use a little help. I met Emily at a UX design workshop in my junior year. She was from Denver, loud in the best way, sharp in the way that made me want to listen. She asked real questions and waited for the answers. She didn't assume I was fine just because I wasn't complaining. We grabbed coffee after the workshop and ended up talking for hours about design systems and bad client briefs. She laughed when I told her my middle name was Wallace and said I looked like a Wallace. I hated the name until that moment. By the time I graduated, I was already working part-time as a developer at a small startup in Austin. Emily had a remote job and moved down with me. We found a tiny apartment in East Austin, barely enough room for our desks and a mattress on the floor, but it was ours. Meanwhile, Ethan flunked out of 2 community colleges and decided he wanted to study film in California. My parents took out a second mortgage on their house to pay his tuition. They called it an investment. I called it enabling. But I didn't say that. I never said anything. One Thanksgiving, we drove back to Mesa. Ethan had just come back from Los Angeles with a shaved head and a new tattoo. He showed off some short film he made about loneliness, and everyone clapped like he'd just won an Oscar. I helped Mom clean the dishes while she talked about how hard it was for Ethan to find his voice. I bit my tongue. Again. Later that night, I sat outside on the porch with Dad. He asked how work was going. I told him I was leading a small team now that we were working on a redesign for a big client. He nodded once, then lit a cigarette. "That's good, Logan," he said. "You've always been responsible. That's your gift. Ethan, though he's sensitive, he needs more support." I looked at the stars above Mesa and felt like they were too far away, like they belonged to someone else. Maybe that was the moment I stopped hoping they would ever see me the way I needed them to. I didn't say anything to Emily on the drive back. I just held her hand and kept my eyes on the road. She didn't push. She never did. She just waited until I was ready. When I finally told her everything, she didn't get angry for me. She got angry with me. You don't have to keep doing this, Logan. You don't owe them your silence. I didn't answer right away because a part of me still thought I did, but that part was starting to shrink. I could feel it. That was the beginning of everything. A few months later, Emily and I started talking seriously about buying our first house. We'd both been saving, comparing listings, meeting with agents. I filled out a pre-approval form online and waited for the call. It came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of debugging a Sprint backlog when the loan officer called. Mr. Carter, are you aware of several recent delinquencies on a credit account under your name? My chest tightened. No, that's not possible, I said, pushing away from my desk. I haven't missed any payments. He listed off 3 maxed-out credit cards, one of which had just gone into collections. It wasn't mine. I didn't open them. I asked him to send me everything. I barely slept that night. The statements arrived in my inbox. Each one had my name, my address from years ago in Mesa, and purchases that didn't belong to me. Camera gear, flights to Los Angeles, Uber charges, restaurant tabs. My blood ran cold. It didn't take long to figure it out. Ethan. No one else had that old address. No one else would have had access to my social. I sat on it for a day, hoping maybe there was some explanation, some mistake. But there wasn't. I called him on Saturday morning. He picked up, sounding half asleep. Hey, Logan. What's up? I went straight to it. Did you open a credit card in my name? Silence. Then a scoff. What? No. Why would I do that? Don't lie to me, I snapped. I have the statements, Mesa address, gear you bought, flights to LA. He hesitated, then he laughed soft and deflective. Dude, relax. It was just temporary. I was gonna pay it off. You used my name, Ethan. You tanked my credit. I'm applying for a mortgage. Do you understand what you've done? More silence, then a low, annoyed sigh. Come on, man. You're doing fine. You've got a good job, a girlfriend, a future. I just needed a leg up. That was it. The final click and a long, slow lock. The same script again. His needs were always bigger, more urgent, more valid. I hung up. The next call was to Mom. She picked up cheerful like nothing was wrong. Hey, sweetheart. How's the house hunting? Did you know Ethan used my name to open credit cards? She went quiet for a beat. Then in the soft voice I knew too well. Oh, honey. He told us he made a mistake. He's still figuring things out. Please don't be hard on him. He's not like you. No, he's not. He gets away with everything, and you let him, Logan, she said, warning in her tone now. He's your brother. He's young. Let it go. He's 27, Mom. And I'm done. I ended the call. Emily found me pacing. She didn't ask what happened. I just handed her the printed statements. She scanned them quietly, then looked up. You cutting him off, all of them, financially, emotionally. I'm done being their fallback. She nodded. Good. About time. That weekend I froze every account, reported the fraud, filed a police report, and sent a cease and desist to Ethan. It felt cold, harsh, but it also felt like air. I was done fixing other people's messes, especially when they had my name on them, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel guilty. Emily and I moved forward. We closed on a small 2-bedroom in South Austin. Nothing fancy, but it had a fenced yard, a real kitchen, and the kind of silence you only get when it's your own name on the deed. I bought a used Prius and named it Max. Emily thought that was hilarious. We split the mortgage, cooked together most nights, and started talking about the future in terms of years instead of months. Meanwhile, Ethan announced on Facebook that he was starting a vlog series. The banner read, "Ethan Carter Films Finding Meaning in the Chaos." His first episode opened with a drone shot of the Pacific Coast Highway. Emily showed it to me while we were making tacos. "You think your parents paid for that drone?" she asked, eyes on her phone. I didn't have to guess. A few days later, I got a text from Margaret. "Just wanted to let you know we gave Ethan a little help. He needed a new MacBook and some equipment to really get started. We believe in his dream. Don't worry, it was only around 20,000. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. 20,000 for a vlog. That weekend, I went to therapy, my first real session. Emily had gently nudged me toward it for months. I never thought I needed it. But now I wasn't so sure. My therapist was a middle-aged guy named Marcus with kind eyes and a disarming silence. He didn't rush, just let me speak. I told him about Ethan, about the money, about the years of playing the good son, the fixer, the buffer. "Sounds like you were trained to disappear," Marcus said. That hit harder than I expected. I hadn't said those words out loud before, but they fit. Like someone had been watching the movie of my life and finally named the genre. We talked about boundaries, about why guilt had always felt like a duty, about how being needed and being loved weren't the same thing. I walked out of that first session feeling like my chest had been cracked open and something finally exhaled. Emily noticed the change. "You look lighter," she said. I felt it too. Not fixed, not healed, but beginning. At work, I got promoted to lead UX engineer. My team respected me. My opinions mattered. I started mentoring a younger dev named Malik, who reminded me a little of myself at 22, hungry but unsure. At home, we hosted dinner parties, laughed until we cried, watched bad reality TV. Lived. And every so often I'd get another update about Ethan. A new camera, a trip to Big Sur, another passive-aggressive quote on his Instagram story about toxic family dynamics. Margaret would call and leave voicemails. "Logan, honey, you haven't called in a while. Your brother misses you." I didn't call back because for the first time I wasn't just living for peace. I was living for me. It started with an email, short, barely 2 sentences. "Your dad wants to talk to you. Can you come home for a weekend, love, Mom?" I stared at it for a while, then forwarded it to Emily with nothing but a question mark. She replied with just one line, "You know what this is." I did. I flew out to Mesa the next Friday. The house looked the same. Beige siding, small porch, Dad's old truck still sitting in the driveway like it hadn't moved in months. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of lemon cleaner and unresolved conversations. Frank was waiting in the garage. He'd set up 2 lawn chairs beside a dusty tool bench. He nodded when he saw me, then gestured for me to sit. I didn't. He got straight to the point. "Ethan's been struggling. The film thing isn't working out. We're thinking of opening a family garage, Carter Auto, right here in town. Your mom and I will help fund it, but we need someone reliable to run the business side. Someone like you." I blinked. "You want me to quit my job and come back here to manage a garage with Ethan?" "It's not about quitting, it's about coming home. You're always talking about building something of your own. This is your chance. Family business, legacy. What about Ethan? He'll be the creative lead, marketing, brand identity, that kind of thing. He's got a good eye." I laughed before I could stop myself. "He's got a good eye, Dad. He's never held a job for more than 6 months." Frank's jaw tightened. "Don't do that. Don't talk about your brother like he's some lost cause. He's got passion. He just needs direction. And I guess I'm supposed to be that direction. Frank stood up. You've got a nice life in Austin, coding, sitting behind a screen. But this is real. This is family. And don't forget, your brother has the soul of an artist. You've always just followed instructions. Something cracked in me then. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked at him for a long time and said no. He stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. You're serious? I am. I have a life, a partner, a career I built from nothing. I'm not giving it all up to babysit Ethan's next failure. Margaret tried to smooth things over later at dinner. Your dad just wants what's best for everyone. You've always been so good at keeping things together. That's not my job anymore, Mom. I flew back to Austin the next morning. When Emily picked me up at the airport, I dropped my bag in the trunk and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath the whole weekend. She looked over at me as we pulled onto I-35. How'd it go? They want me to run a garage with Ethan. She blinked. Are you kidding? Nope. And I told them no. She smiled and reached for my hand. Good. A few weeks after I got back from Mesa, I started ring shopping. Nothing flashy. Emily wasn't the type. I went with a vintage setting, a simple oval diamond set in gold that reminded me of how she wore her grandmother's necklace on our first date. I proposed in our backyard with tacos and wine and fairy lights that barely stayed up. She cried. I cried. Max barked. We told her parents first. They were thrilled. Her mom texted me a list of caterers before the night ended. Her dad offered to help build a dance floor. It felt easy, light, like it should. When we told mine, Margaret paused longer than I expected. Well, congratulations, she finally said. Just try not to spend everything you have. Weddings are expensive. You don't want to start off broke. That was it. No questions about the date. No offer to help. No real joy. Just a warning not to mess it up. Frank chimed in a little later. Said it was good to see us settling down. Added that marriage was work and we should be ready to make sacrifices. I knew what he meant. He meant Emily should be ready to put up with me. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't squeeze back. We drove home in silence. Halfway through the trip, she said, "They're never going to give you what you want." Are they? I shook my head. I think I just wanted them to show up, to say they were proud. You know you don't need that to be whole, right? I know. But it would have been nice. Planning the wedding became our escape. Emily was meticulous. She built a Notion board with tabs for everything from vendors to napkin colors. I mostly followed her lead, chiming in where I could, making dumb jokes to break the tension when we argued about music. We agreed early on that we'd pay for everything ourselves. I didn't want their money, not if it came with strings. Emily supported that without hesitation. We started setting aside more from our paychecks, cut back on takeout, even canceled a planned trip to Seattle. One night over dinner, Emily said, "I think we should talk to Avery." Avery was one of her closest friends, a corporate attorney who specialized in contracts. I blinked. For what? Gifts, money, ownership, just in case. Just in case what? Just in case someone tries to make a claim. You know your family. I trust you, but I don't trust them. I hated that she was right, and I hated even more that I hadn't thought of it first. Avery came over that weekend. She was blunt, efficient, and kind in the way lawyers can be when they're doing their job and still care about the people in the room. She drafted a document outlining that all financial gifts given to us at the wedding would be legally considered joint marital property, not subject to family claim or redirection. Emily signed first. I hesitated. Not because I didn't agree, but because it felt like a line in the sand I hadn't wanted to draw. I signed anyway. Avery looked at me and said, "This is just a net. It doesn't mean you expect to fall. It means if you do, you don't break. After she left, I sat on the porch with Emily. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I think I just needed that net more than I realized. The sky above Austin was clear. Stars were faint, but they were there. I wondered if my parents had ever seen mine, if they even knew where to look. We picked a date, sent out invites, booked a small venue with string lights and long picnic tables. It felt like us, honest, warm, intentional. I still held on to a sliver of hope that maybe they'd show up differently this time, that maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. Sophie called on a rainy Tuesday. She lived in Salt Lake City, where we'd both grown up, and still worked as a paralegal at the firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. You might want to sit down, she said. Her voice was half nervous, half amused. I was already sitting. What's going on? Turns out my grandfather, Henry Caldwell, had left me something. A small 2-bedroom house on the west side of Salt Lake, valued at just over $200,000. It had been his first home, long paid off, modest but well maintained. And apparently he'd made sure in his final will that it would go to me, not my parents. I didn't remember much about Henry. He died when I was 16. But I remembered that he always looked me in the eye, that he called me young man like it meant something, that he once pulled me aside at a birthday party and told me never to let people mistake silence for weakness. Sophie went quiet for a beat, then said, Logan, he wanted you to have a safety net. He told us so. I swallowed. Then why am I just hearing about this now? Because the will was contested. Not by Frank officially, but by Margaret. She said it would cause tension, said you were too young, that it'd be better held in trust until you were married. My stomach turned. So what happened? It was tied up in review for a year. Then it went quiet. But I found a note on one of the digital files last week. Said the property had been transferred under your name. No mortgage, just a property tax record. I closed my eyes. I'd been paying taxes on that house for 3 years. They came bundled in an account I thought was part of my retirement plan. Margaret had mentioned consolidating some things. They knew. They'd let me keep paying it, probably thought I'd never notice, and figured that made it theirs by proxy. I didn't tell Emily right away. I needed time to think, to breathe. 3 days later, I drove to Salt Lake. The house was still there. White paint, blue shutters, lawn half wild, empty. I stood on the porch for a long time. I didn't have a key, but I knew the side window trick. Henry had shown me once, grinning like a magician. Inside it smelled like old wood and dust, but it felt safe. Mine. Like maybe I hadn't imagined the love I thought he'd given me. I spent the weekend clearing brush, fixing a broken step, calling a locksmith. I filed paperwork to confirm the property was under my name. Everything checked out, quietly, officially, legally. I didn't confront my parents. Not yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to give them the chance to explain it away. Emily met me at the airport. She didn't ask questions, just held my hand. Back in Austin, I added the deed to our wedding file, right next to the prenup, the guest list, and the menu selections. I still wasn't sure how I felt. Angry, grateful, tired, all at once. But one thing was clear. They'd always seen me as optional, and I was done letting them decide what I was worth. The week before the wedding, I got a call from Margaret. She sounded tired. Not physically, but the kind of emotional fatigue that comes from wanting to say something you know won't land well. Weddings are expensive, she said, like it was news. And your brother's been having a hard time finding steady work. His YouTube channel hasn't picked up like he hoped. I let the silence hang. Frank joined the call a few minutes later. His voice was flat. Your mother and I think it would be best if we managed the cash gifts. Just for a while. Ethan could use the help. You and Emily have stable incomes. It's time to support the family, like you always have. I clenched my jaw. So you want me to fund Ethan's film career with my wedding gifts? It's not about that, Frank said. It's about balance, about doing what's right. I ended the call without another word. Emily found me pacing the kitchen. They want the money, I said, for Ethan. She didn't flinch. We already protected it. Let them try. Still something itched. That feeling I got as a kid when Margaret lied about where my birthday cards went. I opened our shared inbox, the one tied to the RSVP list. Nothing odd. But when I checked the spreadsheet Emily built, one column was blank. Payment confirmations. Guests had sent gifts, but nothing had hit our account. I dug further. Buried in the email archives was a forwarded message from Margaret. She'd replied to a guest asking for wiring instructions. Her message said, Logan and Emily asked me to collect the gift funds directly. Please send to the following account. It was her account. I showed Emily. She didn't yell, didn't curse, just stood very still, then said calmly, We have legal ground. Let me talk to Avery. I nodded, breath shallow. They were stealing from us, again. But this time I wasn't a kid, and I wasn't alone. Emily sent Avery the documents within the hour. She flagged the situation and told us not to confront anyone until the wedding. Let them act. Let them incriminate themselves. I couldn't sleep that night, not out of fear, out of grief, that even now, with everything in writing, they still saw me as a resource, not a person. Emily rubbed my back as I stared at the ceiling. They don't know you, she said. Maybe they never did. I rolled over and whispered I used to think being good would change them. She kissed my forehead. Being good doesn't mean letting people hurt you. The next morning we got an email from one of Emily's aunts. She said she was confused. She'd sent a wedding check to Margaret but hadn't received a thank you. We cross-checked the date. It matched a deposit Margaret made into a new savings account listed under her maiden name. Emily printed everything, logged it, filed it in the wedding binder under a new tab. She labeled it, In Case of War. I looked at her and said, You really think it could come to that? She met my gaze. I think it already has. I didn't respond because she was right, and deep down I knew this wedding wasn't going to be about love, it was going to be about the truth. The morning of the wedding was strangely peaceful. Emily woke up before me and brought coffee to the window, where I sat watching the sun creep over the skyline of Austin. For the first time in weeks, my chest wasn't tight. She looked stunning, not just in her dress, but in the way she moved, centered, grounded. We didn't speak much that morning, just moved around each other with soft smiles like a quiet agreement to let joy lead just for today. When we arrived at the venue, the staff had everything in order. The ceremony space was framed with white orchids and soft navy accents. Our names, Logan and Emily, were printed in gold on everything from place cards to cocktail napkins. It was the life I had built, not inherited, not borrowed. Ours. Margaret greeted us in the foyer. Her hair was styled neatly, makeup more polished than I had seen in years. She hugged me and slipped a card into my hand. You've really grown into yourself, Logan, she said. Today you're truly our son. I opened the envelope when she walked away. Inside was a handwritten note. Today you are our family. We are proud of you. Love, Mom. My eyes burned. For a second I let myself believe it. Maybe they had changed. Emily glanced at the note and said nothing. Her silence wasn't cold, just cautious. She had seen too much to be swept up by surface sweetness. The ceremony was perfect. Every word in our vows felt earned. Every tear that fell during the exchange was honest. When I looked out at the guests, I saw friends, co-workers, mentors, people who knew me now, not through the lens of a family story, but through the choices I had made to become this man. As we walked back down the aisle hand in hand, I heard Ethan whistle loudly, a joking clap behind us. It felt almost normal. The reception was warm and buzzing, laughter, music, champagne. We moved through the crowd with practiced grace, collecting hugs, congratulations, and envelopes. Each gift was logged and stored in a steel lockbox provided by the venue coordinator. Emily had insisted. She trusted love, but not blindly. Not anymore. The band played our first song. I held Emily close, letting the rhythm ground me. For a moment, everything else faded, the betrayals, the tension, the months of anxiety. All that remained was the woman in my arms and the life we had chosen. But even then, a whisper of doubt lingered in the back of my mind. A question I couldn't shake. Were they here to celebrate us or to take one last thing before letting go? After the first dance, I stepped off the floor to grab a glass of water. Margaret caught my arm with a smile too rehearsed to be real. "Come with me for a second," she said, already pulling me toward the back hallway near the storage area behind the stage. Her heels clicked too fast for a woman her age. I followed. Emily's laugh faded behind me. My stomach tightened. She turned once we were out of sight. Her voice was soft, almost maternal. "Logan, we've been thinking." Frank emerged from the shadows like he'd been waiting. Margaret continued. "The gift money. We're going to hold on to it for now. Just to manage things. Ethan needs it more than you do." My brain stalled. Frank added, "You have a house, a job, a wife. Ethan is still trying to find his footing. It's only fair we help him now, as a family." I looked at them both, then back toward the door. Emily was somewhere out there, smiling, celebrating, trusting this day. "You want to take our wedding money?" I asked, voice calm but thin. "It's not about taking," Frank said. "It's about doing what's right." Margaret nodded as if this made perfect sense. "It's not forever, just until Ethan's channel picks up. You know how hard it is for him." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because just then footsteps echoed from the hallway. Emily stepped into view, flanked by Avery, who held a manila envelope in one hand and a hard stare in the other. "We figured this might happen," Emily said. Her voice was steady, clear. Avery stepped forward, opened the envelope, and pulled out 2 documents. "This is a legal record of all monetary gifts received for Logan and Emily Carter's wedding," she said. Each guest who contributed signed a form acknowledging the funds were intended solely for the bride and groom. She handed Frank a copy. "And this," she continued, "is a notarized agreement declaring any redirection or withholding of those funds as misappropriation." Margaret blinked. "You brought a lawyer to your wedding?" "No," I said. "We brought a friend who knew this might happen." Frank's face hardened. "You think we're thieves?" I shrugged. "I think history repeats itself." Emily stepped closer to me. "Let's go back. People are waiting." We turned together. Margaret's voice followed us. "This is a betrayal. You've changed." I paused, looked over my shoulder. "No, Mom. I've finally stayed the same. You just don't recognize it." And then we walked back into the light where the music still played and the life we chose waited to continue. As the music hummed behind us and the scent of champagne lingered in the air, Frank stood still with the document trembling slightly in his grip. His fingers tightened around the edge as he read each line, his eyes darting, his jaw rigid. Margaret hovered beside him, trying to read over his shoulder. He shifted to block her view. "This is unnecessary," Frank muttered finally, voice hoarse. "It's more than necessary," Avery replied, stepping forward. "Every transaction is recorded. Every guest signed acknowledgement. The money belongs exclusively to Logan and Emily. It's protected. Emily's hand rested gently at the small of my back. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Frank's brows furrowed deeper. This isn't how families should operate. We don't bring lawyers into celebrations. We also don't treat our children like bank accounts, I said, watching his eyes twitch. Margaret extended her hand toward mine. I stepped away. Her fingertips curled into her palm. "We're your parents," she said. "We've only ever tried to help you both. Ethan needs the support now." "You're fine. He's not my responsibility," I said. "Not anymore." Footsteps pounded behind us. Ethan appeared, breath short, tie, loosened face flushed. "What's going on?" Frank handed him the document silently. Ethan's eyes scanned quickly, then narrowed. "You really brought a lawyer to your wedding over gift money," he barked. "You've got everything, Logan. A career, a place, a woman who actually loves you, and now you're hoarding money from the people who raised you." "It's not hoarding when it's mine," I said flatly. "Your entitlement doesn't rewrite reality." Ethan stepped forward, voice escalating. "You've always thought you were better than me, that you earned everything, but you had it easy. You were the golden boy. I was the invisible one I corrected. While you broke rules and got bailed out, I cleaned up the messes. Alone." Margaret's face fell. Ethan's glare sharpened. "You think this money proves something, that you're finally worth more than me?" "It's not about worth. It's about boundaries, something none of you ever respected." Ethan scoffed. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with being right all the time, people would like you more." Emily stepped between us. "That's enough." He turned on her. "You're part of this now." "Great. Married into Control Freak Central." Avery's voice cut through, crisp and measured. "I suggest you all stop. Now. You're inches from legal escalation." Frank's face paled. His pride buckled under the weight of paperwork and public confrontation. "We're not pressing charges," I said, trying to steady my voice. "But if any guest's contribution was misused, they will be informed, transparently." Emily pulled out a secondary list from her purse. "One copy for us, one for the venue coordinator. No money leaves this building unless it's by our instruction." Margaret blinked rapidly. Her mouth opened, then shut. The crowd behind the curtain still clapped, unaware. Ethan's fists curled. "You're not better than me," he hissed. "I never said I was, but I'm done pretending we're the same." His foot slammed down on the envelope before he turned away, teeth clenched. Margaret tried to follow, but Frank held her arm. "No more," he said under his breath. "Not this time." We stood in silence. For once I didn't try to fill the gap. Emily laced her fingers with mine. Avery adjusted her blazer and nodded. It was done. Not just the argument, but the cycle, the manipulation, the guilt. I exhaled, slowly letting the truth settle in my chest. We walked back into the reception. The lights still glowed golden. Music flowed. Guests chatted and smiled. But the room felt different now. Lighter. Mine. The buzz of the room faded into the background as Emily and I rejoined the reception. Everything looked just as it had an hour earlier, but nothing felt the same. I moved through the guests like a ghost, nodding politely, accepting congratulations. But my mind was somewhere else. Margaret found me first. Her perfume hit me before her voice did. "Logan," she said softly, as if her tone could erase what just happened. "Let's talk. This doesn't have to end like this." I turned to face her, calm but resolute. "You mean it doesn't have to end without you getting what you want?" She blinked rapidly. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is spending your whole life earning love and still coming up short." Frank stepped in stiff and uncomfortable. Son, we're your parents. We've always supported you. Don't throw that away. Supported me? I asked, surprised by my own steady voice. You mean the way you gave Ethan everything and handed me responsibility? Frank's jaw tightened. That's not what happened. I looked at him, then at Margaret. You were never just my parents. You were Ethan's team. I was the insurance policy, the backup plan. That's not true, Margaret whispered. We love you both, but you protected him at my expense every single time. Ethan showed up, then flushed and aggressive. You're really gonna keep doing this? Even today, he barked. This, I asked, setting boundaries, standing up for myself. Ethan's face twisted. You're acting like a victim. You had everything. Good grades, scholarships, Emily. I had pressure, expectations, and silence, I said. You had freedom. You're selfish. I smiled without humor. I learned from the best. Emily's hand found mine again, grounding me. Ethan scoffed. You'll regret cutting off your own family. Emily finally spoke. He's not cutting off family. He's walking away from abuse. Margaret stepped forward. Emily, please. Don't get in between. Emily didn't flinch. I'm not in between. I'm beside him. Where you should have been. Frank's nostrils flared. That's enough. No, I said. That's the truth. Margaret reached out. Logan, please. Let's not do this. Let's just be together today. You mean pretend like we always do? She looked like I slapped her. I hated that, but I didn't step back. We're your family, she said, eyes glistening. You've always been Ethan's family, I said. I was just a useful accessory. She gasped. Frank grabbed her arm. Let him go. Ethan shouted something again, something angry and sharp, but I didn't even hear the words. They were just noise. We turned and walked. Not fast, not angry, just done. Past the buffet, past the open bar, past the smiling faces who had no idea a chapter was closing behind the curtain. Outside, the night air was sharp and cleansing. Emily squeezed my hand tighter. You okay? Yeah. I think I finally am. We reached the car. I opened the door for her. She got in without a word, just a knowing look. I took one last glance at the venue. There were fairy lights strung across the patio. Music still drifted out. It could have been anyone's perfect night. It was mine, just not because of them. I got in, turned the key, and drove toward a future I was finally building on my own terms. When we got back to Austin, it didn't feel like we were simply returning home. It felt like we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The apartment welcomed us with quiet, and I could finally breathe without feeling the weight of my last name dragging behind me. Emily and I spent the next few days wrapped in a stillness that felt both foreign and sacred. We cooked together, reorganized the cabinets, turned the wedding gifts into small investments in our future. It was mundane, but it felt like healing. I paid off the last $8 and $300 on my student loans. Emily cleared her credit card debt. We sat on the floor with spreadsheets and bank apps open, laughing every time we knocked another item off the list. Then we tackled the harder work, my credit score. Years of neglect from being linked to Ethan's reckless borrowing had left scars on my financial record. Emily found a credit repair consultant who walked us through the process. It would take months, maybe even years. But for the first time, I felt equipped to fix it, and more importantly, I felt deserving of fixing it. Emily suggested a getaway before jumping into house hunting. We booked a long weekend in Sedona. There was something about the Arizona desert, the unfiltered skies and massive red rocks that made everything else feel small. I stood at the edge of Cathedral Rock at sunrise, and it hit me. I had spent 3 decades living in someone else's story. And it was finally time to write mine. When we came back, we found the house. It wasn't huge or flashy, just a modest 1-story in North Austin. with a shaded backyard and enough room to build a future. It reminded me of homes I used to draw as a kid. We made an offer. It was accepted within 48 hours. A week later, I resumed therapy. My therapist smiled the moment I walked in. "You look different," she said. I told her everything. The wedding, the confrontation, the silence that followed. She didn't interrupt once. When I was done, she said something that stayed with me. "You're not running anymore. You're choosing." That night, I dusted off an old notebook I hadn't touched since college. I wrote for hours. About pain. About expectation. About how sometimes the most radical thing you can do is tell your own truth even if it burns the bridge behind you. Emily framed one of our wedding photos, us under the oak arch, wind in her hair, my hand on hers. She hung it above our fireplace. I stared at it for a long time, not because I needed to remember the day, but because I finally understood the expression on my face. It was relief. We invited friends over for a small housewarming. No parents, no guilt, just tacos, wine, music, and the kind of laughter that didn't ask you to perform. I looked around at the people we chose, the family we were building, and it felt like oxygen. One night I sat alone on the porch, journal in my lap. The cicadas hummed like they had every chapter of my life. But this time I wasn't listening for danger. I was listening for peace. I flipped to a clean page and wrote, "Family isn't the people who share your name. It's the people who don't flinch when you stop pretending." I closed the book, looked up at the stars, let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who raised you just to become the person you were meant to be, share this story. Someone out there might still be trapped in a version of love that demands silence. Let them know they're not alone.